Hello, it's Mr. Frazier. We're going to go over 7-1 lesson assignment. Please remember you have to download a copy of this. Hopefully you do it before you actually start the assignment. So I'd pause the video now and go ahead and grab a copy of it. Or you have to do this on your own. Okay, it says, Jimmy is working 2 jobs to save money for his college education. He makes $8 per hour working for his uncle at a pizza supply bussing tables, and $10 per hour tutoring his peers after school in math. His goal is to make $160 per week. Okay? So if he's got 2 jobs, so here we have 2 rates of change. So I'm going to write my equation in which form? Remember, my 2 forms are y equals mx plus b, which is called slope-intercept. And the reason it's called slope-intercept is because this number is the slope, the number in front of x, and this number is the y-intercept, the number at the end, okay? Or without the x. Or we're going to write it in standard form, which is ax plus by equals c. Now, hopefully you remember that standard form has 2 rates of change. Slope-intercept only has 1. Well, here we have 2 rates of change, $8 per hour and $10 per hour. So this one says if Jeremy works 8 hours at the pizza place, and remember we put the 8 in parentheses because we're putting it in for the x, and, which means plus, 11 hours, and tutors 11 hours, which would be $10 at 11 hours. This was $8. Does he reach his goal? So 8 is 64. 10 times 11 is 110. You add the 2, and you get 174. Does he reach his goal? Yes. B. Write an expression to represent the total amount of money he makes in a week from both jobs. Okay, so that would be 8x. Most of you knew this was coming. 10y. Okay. And we write an expression, not an equation. We don't put it equal to anything yet because an expression has no equal sign, it's just the variables. Jeremy decides he needs to make more than 160. So that means when he does 8x plus 10y, he needs to make more than means this is greater than 160. If he said at least, it would be greater than or equal to. If he said at most, it would be less than or equal to. So you got to remember what those words mean, okay? Then it says graph the inequality, okay? So because it's in standard form, I'm not going to use slope y-intercept. Hopefully you know, because it's in standard form, I'm going to do x-intercept and the y-intercept, which means to find x-intercept, I'm going to put a 0 in for y, so I just cover it up, so it ends up being 8x is greater than 160, and then to solve for y, I cover up this, put a 0 in for it. That's what putting a 0 in does. Remember, 0 times anything is 0, so I can just cover it up. It ends up being 10y is greater than 160. Alright, so those would be my x and y intercepts. So let's label our graph. Hopefully you know this is hours at the pizza place. And this is hours tutoring. Okay. And then of course I'm going to count by ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on and so forth. And I'm going to count by ones here. Except I'm going to count every other one. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, but I'm still counting by ones. Right. Okay, so I'm going to find the x and y intercept. So I ended up with 10y equals 160. So that means the y-intercept equals 16. So we got 14 and 16. So the y-intercept is 16, so I put the dot there. And then the x-intercept would be 8x is equal to 160. So x is equal to 20. Okay, so I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Imagine that. There's exactly 20 lines. All right? Now I draw a line. This is the part where most of you try to draw a generic line. You can't do that. Okay? In other words, you got to use a straight edge and draw a line. So there's my straight edge, and I drew a line. It's got to be nice and neat, or it'll serve you no purpose. And there you go. Am I finished though? No. So I drew the line originally in blue so that you could understand that you're supposed to draw which type of line. Okay, so now I'm doing this part. Graphing the points was easy. This tells me it is a dotted line. Why is it a dotted line? Because it does not say what? Equal to, right. Because it doesn't say equal to, I just use a dotted line. Where is my magic marker? I use a dotted line. Okay. So this should be dotted or dashed, excuse me. Okay, so there's my dashed line. I'll zoom in so that you understand that it's dashed. I used a different color. Okay. And then I'm supposed to shade. Okay. Now, it says greater than. Okay. And the issue I have is the y by itself? And it isn't. So in order for me to know which side of this I'm going to shade, you either have to plug in points, and they told you to use 0, 0, which is the easiest one. So if I put in 0, 0, because that's below it, 0, 0, it says 0 is greater than 160. Is that true? No. So by plugging in the points, and by plugging in 0, 0, I can see is this answer here, meaning any of these answers, the right one. And I plug in 0, 0 because that makes both of these terms what? 0, correct. So I plug in 0, 0, and I get 0 is greater than 160. I know that is not true, so that means this is the part that should be shaded. And this is how I shade. Okay. So that means anything not on that line and higher is my answer. All right. So now, part E says, is point 0, 0 in the shaded region of the graph? Wait a minute. No, it is not. And the reason being, and I show it, because when I put 8 times 0 plus 10 times 0 is greater than 160, I get 0 plus 0, which is 0 is greater than 160, and that is not true. Okay? And this would be good enough for an explanation. So my answer would be no. And there's my reason why. Now, according to graph, Jeremy works 5 hours at the pizza pie and tutors 10 hours. Will he make more than 160? So now we're just going to use the graph. If he worked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, that means here, and I I go up and worked 10 hours tutoring, which is here, those two will meet right here. Will he make enough money? And hopefully you see on the graph, no, he's still below the line. So he'd be no, because the point 5, 10 is still below the line. The point 5, 10 is still below the line. K and G. Due to days off from school, Jeremy will only be tutoring 6 hours this week. Use the graph to determine the least amount of full hours he must work at the pizza to reach his goal. So now I go to tutoring, which is my Y, and I go to 6 hours. And I'm going to look all the way across my graph. And he needs to work how many hours to be on the other side of the line at the pizza place? So he needs to work at least, this is the first place past it, there. That's part of the answer, it's not on the line. So now I gotta count how many hours that is. Now I'm gonna count backwards. So this is 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13. So he would need to work at least 13 hours at the pizza place. So I would say he needs to work at least 13 hours at the pizza place. And then I plug in those numbers. So I have 6 hours for tutoring plus 13 hours at the pizza place, and it has to be greater than 160. So now I do the math. This is $60 plus 13 times 8 times 3 is 24, carry the 2, 8, 104, and I get 164 is greater than 160. And that shows that is true. All right, so in this one, we do a test to see where the answer is. We also understand how to write an inequality, how to graph it based on its style. Now, hopefully you remember, if you wanted to, and I'm going to show you, if you wanted to, you could change this into slope-intercept form, which means you'd move the x over, right? And you'd have 10y is greater than negative 8x plus 160, right? Then we divide this whole thing by 10, and you would have y is greater than negative 4/5, and that's only because you can reduce 8/10, right? 8 over 10 is 4/5, and dividing 160 by 10 is 16. So you could have changed it. Remember, your x goes here. You could have changed it to slope-intercept form and graphed it that way as well. It doesn't matter which way you do it. Obviously, writing it in standard form and using the x and y intercept is quicker, but you could change it to this and then use the slope and the y-intercept. Notice the y-intercept is still 16, and then you would go down 4 and over 5, put a dot, and draw a line. Okay, remember, work well. Hopefully you take really good notes. I'm going to really show up here and give you another look at, these notes are already online. They're located right next to this. You can either copy these, which means you'd freeze this, or you can print them out. Either way. But this gives you the that you must graph and it shows you that you can pick one or the other. But you need two of the three to be able to graph. And hopefully you remember alphabetically, B comes first, so you always put the slope intercept first. That means put that point on the y-axis, and then you do the slope, because M is the next letter in the alphabet. And that means we move from this point that I just put, and I move the slope up or down. Remember, you got to know whether your slope is positive or negative. You should, when you're done, your line should either be going up or down, right? And then if it was in standard form, you can do the x-intercept and the y-intercept. Please just be careful when you draw your line. It could be a dashed line or a solid line. If it's equal, it's solid. If it's just less than or greater than, it's dashed. And then, of course, if your answer is greater than, if it's in this form, y equals mx plus b, if the greater than is in this form, then you're shading above. If it's less than, you're shading below. If it's in standard form, plug in a point and see if that point is the answer. If it's not, then shade the other side. All right?